next speaker will be speaking on high school administrative behavior. So, Mr. Yee.
Good evening. My name is Alexander Yee. I'm an incoming senior at Gabriel High School. For many of us, this is like a meet and greet, and this typically involves asking the question, what do you want to be in the future? So I guess we'll just start with that. In the future, I want to be a policy analyst, a policy advisor, and a scholar, all on the international level. Now, for many who actually know me, that's kind of a nightmare, but for me, in order to pursue that goal, I actually want to pursue higher education at top-level schools. But these aspirations aren't just mine alone. These are aspirations that students at Gabriel have. These are aspirations that they've had, and these are aspirations that I believe students will have in the future. But at the same time, going to Gabriel might not necessarily be a way to expand a student's horizons or opportunities. Rather, it might be something that diminishes their opportunities. How and why can be better understood by discussing several examples. The first, on May 7th, 2014, about 30 students were taking the AP Chinese Language and Culture exam. For the past several years, this exam has been digitized, meaning students have to use computers to take the exam. Last year, as we all know, technology sometimes malfunctions, and the precedence was set that if a keyboard doesn't work or if headphones don't work, students would wait until after the test was over to try to fix their problems. That way they wouldn't distract any of their neighbors from taking the exam. This year, when students were taking the exam, a vice principal of Gabriel was in the room. However, when a student's microphone malfunctioned, the vice principal kind of deviated from precedence. For starters, many of the students were already on the listening section of the exam, and about only one student was stuck trying to configure the microphone. However, instead of sticking to precedence, the vice principal instead just went up, snatched the headphones, and explained into the microphone, "Hello, hello, hello." Now, after the test, about 10 students complained that they were too distracted by the vice principal's efforts, and they couldn't focus on the test. Now, one of the largest implications that we can probably draw from this is perhaps the lack of consideration that administrative members might have towards students. But the vice principal showed several things. Perhaps the first is the fact that she didn't necessarily know what was going on in the classroom. She didn't necessarily know that students were actually on the listening section, and as a result, she may have obstructed the performance of students who had prepared for the test for the entire school year. But the second is the fact that she may have had a lack of understanding of what the students were doing. For an example, the microphone configures itself to tailor to the student's voice, not the vice principal's. Now, the second example comes from last year. A student was applying for college. Now, one of the best things about Gabriel counselors is the fact that they're arguably experts on the California State University and the University of California systems. However, this particular student was trying to apply for private schools. And unfortunately, the counselors didn't necessarily have a working knowledge of the private school application system, the common application. So when the student asked her counselor about applying to a private college, applying for a fee waiver with the common application, the counselor explained, "Okay, absolutely, I'll do this for you." But 3 weeks later, the counselor failed to get back to the student. So the student returned and asked the counselor what was going on. They eventually worked together to try to fill things out, and afterwards the counselor made two remarks. The first, "I had no idea how to do this." And the second, but perhaps most profound, "I had no idea that this actually existed." Now, the third example is also another occurrence that a student had with a counselor. This was just this past summer when a student emailed a counselor about trying to apply to classes. Now, every time the student asked a question, the counselor replied with one word. It was a yes or a no. And this forced the student to ask a chain of questions, all of which were clarifying, and finally, after about 4 or 5 emails, the counselor explained that he would no longer reply to the student via email, and the student would have to meet the counselor in the office. Now, usually this wouldn't necessarily be a problem, but this was actually after summer break had already begun, and the student was very likely already on vacation, which means that he or she couldn't have gone to the counselor to ask for any advice physically. Now, these are just 3 of the several examples of what I see as some sort of a dysfunction within Gabrielino's administration. Now, that's not to say that Gabrielino's administration in its entirety is terrible, because it's not. They've done a lot of correct things. For an example, they've supported the speech and debate program, they've supported the mock trial program. We have someone in the audience who supports Gabriel athletics, and the list goes on. In fact, there are many faculty members in the audience. There are 2 coaches, 1 teacher, all of whom have been very instrumental to my development, and very likely the development of other students. So Gabriel is a place that I absolutely love. And I feel as if there is much room for improvement, and the people who are running the school can absolutely do so. But from the aforementioned examples, it's clear that there is some sort of lack of consideration that administrative members are giving towards the students. And if this trend continues, there's not going to be a tradition of excellence, but rather just a tradition of mediocrity at the school. Because students can only do so much to try to improve themselves. At the end of the day, the administrative members also have to provide some tools and some opportunities for the students. And not only that, they also have to take efforts to prevent, even if it's on accident, obstruction to student opportunities. Now, perhaps Gabriel High School may have some sort of dysfunction in the administration, but I feel as if improvement is definitely impossible. Is definitely possible.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. Alexander, since this is not a agenda items, the board cannot discuss, but we do appreciate your feedback. And we will work with the district to address the matters. Okay. Moving